This week we're continuing with our monthly topic, this month about quilting around applique. I'd like to talk about two things, and the first thing is the ditch work around our applique. Now, I think Claire touched on it while she was speaking about our thread choices, and I also mentioned it in our last video. But ditching around your applique is quite important. It's what finishes and refines the work that you do, and letting it stand out, and making it proud and calling attention to it. Ditch work also serves as a purpose to stabilize your quilt block. So ditch work is quite important, and that's what you'll see I've done here already in the white lines of this star applique block. This is actually a three-dimensional folded star, and it reminds me of a sunflower almost. So I would have gone and ditched around the star. Now you can choose whether you're going to match your thread to the background, which is what my personal preference would be, since your ditch stitches would most likely sit on the background rather than on the applique. Or if you're unsure, you can always go with a monofilament thread, invisible thread that won't be visible where you stitch. So first things first would be about ditching. I would go and ditch around the block, and I would ditch around the applique. That way I've stabilized my quilt, and I've highlighted and finessed and finished off my applique design. The next thing is picking a background design to fill around the block with. And here I want to just chat about the scale. So let's just have a look. If I fill the background of this applique block with like a type of a crosshatch checkerboard design, let's just go and do that. Where my blocks are fairly big, say they're 2 inches big for argument's sake, there's a lot of focus then that happens on the background design, and it can easily overshadow the applique design. If you have applique that's more finely detailed, you really do need to take care and look at the scale of your full design so that it does not take away from the focus or from the accent of the applique. That's the feature of the block. That's what's shining. And you want to do whatever quilting you are doing, you want to add on and emphasize the applique, not take away and detract from it. And that's sometimes a fine line. So I want you to really consider the scale, and the best way, the absolute best way to do that is either in a drawing app on your phone if you are happy with technology, or by placing a piece of preview paper or a clear plastic layer on top of your actual quilt block, and then drawing with a water-soluble marker onto that plastic, and do audition of the design. Draw it in a large scale, see what it looks like, what you have in your mind, but then also draw it in a smaller scale for finer detail and see what it does to your block. So let's see. Here, these negative spaces, which are these black squares, will stay puffy, and that will detract quite a lot from the applique block and the 3D element that we're trying to highlight here. But if we were going to go to a smaller scale, and I would match my thread to the background, you will have a finer scale, smaller detail that creates a background, not a focal point, but a background, so that your focal point, the applique, can stand out. I'd like to show you 2 design options that you can now go and play with. Maybe it's something a little bit different. Go and try it. It's based on a grid, and it's great for a background behind applique, filling behind areas, but also, standalone, like in a border. So the first design, you are going to pounce yourself a grid. Remember that with a pounce pad and a stencil, it's so much quicker and more accurate to work with. Both of these are available in our online shop. My preference, or my first choice always, or my most versatile stencil, is a 1-inch grid, because with that I can do 1-inch squares, but also 1/2-inch squares by offsetting the grid. But we have it available in a 1/2-inch, 1-inch, 1.5, and 2-inch grids. So grid yourself a background area, or an area that you're going to do this design in. And we are now going to work in a sequence. So back and forth across our blocks, and we're going to travel in our ditch lines or in our seam lines. Remember, traveling is allowed. So here's how this design works, and this creates a diamond effect, almost looking like upholstery that's been pulled in with buttons. So here's how this one goes. We're going to start in one corner, and you can do this freehand or you can use a ruler, just depending on how big your squares are. If you're going to work with 1 inch and smaller squares, I would go freehand. If you're going to work across 2-inch squares, for instance, I'd use my ruler because that space is rather large, and being able to sew in a straight line diagonally can be tricky. So use a ruler to do this. So first round, we're going to work our way across. Okay, I just want to undo that bit, and it goes like this. We're just going to go diagonal up to the opposite corner and diagonal down, diagonal up, diagonal down. So we're basically quilting chevrons. Now I'm going to travel in the ditch wherever I stopped, traveling in the ditch, and I'm going to complete that block, and I'm going to do my triangles in the opposite direction. Sorry, I missed a step. Let me just go back. Travel in the ditch and go up. Now when I'm coming down, what I'm going to do is quilt a little knot where these two lines intersect, and I call it a gemorsie. Okay, and just to make it, I'm just going to draw it large here for you. How you make a gemorsie is you literally just stitch like that. Okay, a little gemorsie, however big you want it. So here's what it looks like. When we reach that point, we come down, and where we cross that previously sewn diagonal line, we make a gemorsie. So a little knot. Oh dear, not what I wanted. There we go. And come down to the crossing. Go up where the intersection, make a gemorsie. Intersection, make a gemorsie. Gemorsie. And we carry on with that line. Right, now we're on the end. We're going to travel down in the ditch, and we're going to do the same thing, except now we're going to add another row of gemorsies. Wherever we have these intersecting points, we're also going to make a gemorsie. So see it like you're pulling in a button on upholstery fabric. Okay, diagonal down and up, make a gemorsie. Down, up, gemorsie. Down, up, and down. Remember, I'm doing it down still at a 45-degree angle to complete this pattern, even though my ditch is cutting off my grid design before my square is complete. And you need to just take that in account when you complete the block. So I'm traveling in the ditch, coming down, remember, intersecting, put a button. Up, button, up, gemorsie. So do you see I'm making gemorsies not at this bottom row? It's not needed, because when I do the next row, it will take care of it. Down, up, up, gemorsie. Down, up, gemorsie. And because we're working with batting underneath, we really get that quilted upholstery effect, and it's truly beautiful. Up, down, row by row. And when you get those intersecting lines, remember, make a gemorsie. And when you reach the top row, so you're basically closing off the pattern and completing it. So by then, your pounced grid, and okay, so let's say you've done what I've just done. I came down and I started making a gemorsie. That's totally fine. Finish your gemorsie by accident if it wasn't meant to be there. And come back up, make your gemorsie. Just carry on. Because now when you do the next row, you're just not going to do that gemorsie. It's already done. You're just going to touch it with your line. What I wanted to say is by the time that you are done with your area, your pounds will be gone. Your pouncing lines will be gone. And you have this upholstered look, a quilted look using quilting. How's that for a weird one? Making khamoshis where we have intersecting lines. And there we go. So that's our design one. I'm going to take the grid away and you can see what the design will look like. Okay, so that can be kind of fun, almost like a fishnet. You can even make it across diamonds. Design 2 is more of a curved design, creates a lot of texture. It's a great freehand design to practice because it pushes you to work in all directions at the same time. So we're kind of going to work with a ribbon candy. Now for those that aren't sure what ribbon candy looks like, it just does that, up, down, curved. So you almost want to do like a figure of 8 but pulled apart, if I can say it like that. So just practice that up, down, curved section first before you then attempt this design. And it looks like this. We're going to do a ribbon candy but diagonally across our squares. So pick a space to start at, and I'm going to go work down diagonally in that direction. Starting with a smaller ribbon candy and just pull it to the size of the grid that you've bounced. Okay, there's one done. Now I'm going to do the next square, but I'm going to work my way. I'm going to swing my design and I'm going to go up diagonally. So just carry on with the flow and swing your design diagonally. Stretch it to the perimeter of the square and up. Down. You make the rules about how many turns ribbons should be in your square. You don't have to count them. So sometimes, just depending on the size of the square, a finer, denser ribbon looks better than a big ribbon. Now, what I do a lot of times with this to make sure that I get my directions correct, just want to add another layer here, is I'll use my chalk pencil and I'll just give myself some markings on my fabric. In other words, if my ribbon candy now in this block happened this way around, then on the next row it must go this way, which means this one is this way. So I give myself directional markers so that I don't mess it up. And don't tell anyone, we're talking out of experience here, so learn from our mistakes. So there's my directional markers. I'm going to go back to my layer that I've been working in and I end it here. So now I know I need to swing my ribbon candy to lie in this direction for this square so that I can get the accurate crisscross effect, and it creates beautiful texture. If you match your thread to your fabric, you don't see the thread work, but you see the texture, and that is just gorgeous. And you can just carry on with your ribbon candy, diagonally filling the squares, pulling your ribbon candy all the way to the perimeter of the square. Remember your direction markers because you will get confused. I can promise you that. And so directional markers really help eliminate the need for unpicking. And we swing it that way again. And it makes for a beautiful background fill. I hope you're going to try. As always, please show us what you've done with these. Until next week, bye-bye.